Well, Alien 3 was one of my first really big movie, and my first association with David Fincher, the director. It was a great experience. I learned a lot from the UK actors I was working with. I was a young actor. There were some very talented, experienced guys on the film. And Charles Dance and Brian Glover and Paul McGann and Daniel Webb and a lot of really talented British actors. And of course, the great David Fincher, who went on to become one of the most legendary filmmakers, certainly of his generation, and I think perhaps of all time. So great experience. And one that I look back on as a really transitional moment for me in terms of my career. Yeah, I've worked several times with David. Alien 3 was, of course, our first association. It was his first movie, one of my first movies, and then we worked together again on Fight Club, and most recently on Mindhunter. And every time I kind of got promoted a little bit to a little bigger part, and I think that's one of the things that people who work for David really admire about him is that he sees everything. And he promotes people from within his own organization. If he believes you have the talent, he'll give you an opportunity to do a job that perhaps another director or producer wouldn't give you that opportunity, but David will. And it really inspires a lot of loyalty and also his tremendous talent. So I've been fortunate to work with him multiple times in my career. Bill Tench is one of the protagonists of the series Mindhunter. So in my previous work that I did for David, I was in smaller parts and more peripheral parts, whereas Bill Tench is certainly a leading character and one of the characters that the audience is supposed to care about. And so it was a big opportunity for me. It meant that I had to do a lot more homework, a lot more preparation, a lot more research, and because I had a lot more responsibility. I remember getting an email from David in which he shared with me some of his thoughts about the character and the guy's background and his mentality and stuff like that, and that was very helpful. But then it's up to the actor to go ahead and flesh it out and make him a living, breathing human being, because he's just words on a page until I bring him to life. And he was inspired rather loosely, in some ways, by Robert Ressler, who was a famous FBI agent originally from Chicago, who had been the partner of John Douglas, who wrote Mindhunter. But he wasn't Ressler. And so I had to find a way to kind of make the character feel multidimensional and make the character feel like he was a product of his era, of his time, and just make it all feel as authentic as possible. The smoking was part of that. I don't smoke, but in the 70s, a lot of cops smoked. And one of the first things that David said to me when I met with him was, "Can you smoke?" And I said, "Sure, of course I can." I smoked when I was a kid in high school. And you remember very quickly that David does a lot of takes, so it's a lot of smoking. Do you know what I mean? You're smoking and smoking and smoking and smoking and smoking and smoking. And after a while, you have to learn to be a little bit judicious about how often you smoke and how much you smoke and stuff like that, because, you can get dizzy, smoking so much. But that's certainly a small price to pay to work with one of the great directors of all time, and in such fascinating subject matter. The human mind. Do you know what I mean? The psychological underpinnings of sexually motivated homicide. Do you know what I mean? It's all a very bizarre but fascinating subject. And all these famous guys that we interviewed, Charles Manson, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer, audience were really intrigued. And the writers were smart enough to try to remain very faithful to the real facts of the cases. So it had an authenticity about it that a lot of television shows don't have. And, and that was part of David's genius, to try to make it as real as possible. Yeah, listen, Tom is the biggest movie star in the world. I've done a couple of films with him. The most recent one was written by Chris McQuarrie, who also wrote Top Gun Maverick and, wrote the original Jack Reacher film. and I always liked Chris and had known about Chris and wanted to work with Chris. And so he called me and he offered me Mission Impossible 8. I like those films. I love shooting in London. So, I agreed to come over and do it. And it was a good experience. It was Tom's 60th birthday party, and mine's coming up soon. And he invited me to his party, which was, very much a star-studded affair. So I appreciated that. Yeah, so I'm about to go to England to shoot a movie with a director named James Haw that stars Rami Malek, who of course won the Academy Award playing Freddie Mercury. It's a thriller. It's based on a book, all about the kind of like inner workings, and the dark side of the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States. I think it's going to be a really good movie, and it's exciting for me. I've always been a fan of Rami, and the director, James, is a close friend of mine. So I think, and they've got some very talented people working on the film. Yeah, I do have a project in mind. I'm working on my directorial debut, which will be an English language adaptation of The Star Maker, a film by the great Italian director Giuseppe Tornatore, a film that won a special jury prize at the Venice Film Festival and was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. Everyone will, of course, remember that Mr. Tornatore directed Cinema Paradiso, which was a huge international hit and won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. And this is the film that Mr. Tornatore wrote and directed right after Cinema Paradiso, a kind of a companion piece, all about Sicily and the cinema and stuff like that. And so we've adapted it into English, and hoping to shoot that next year. A big hello to everybody at Team Up Media, and just thanks to everybody at Team Up Media.